welcome to this new episode of the JCMC interview series. It's really a pleasure. Today we have a big host because our host today is Professor Ashish Khanna, who is Associate Professor in Anesthesiology at the Wake Forest School of Medicine, North Carolina, USA. So welcome, Ashish.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Michelle, for having me. And again, as someone who, publishes with the JCMC, thank you. This is a great opportunity, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I also introduce myself. I introduce myself every time. I'm Michele Introna. I'm a neuroanesthesiologist and I work at Istituto Best of Milano. So today we are with Ashish talking about a nice study that came out in the JCMC a couple of weeks ago. That is called Assessment of Skin Pigmentation-Related Bias in Pulse Oximetry Readings Among Adults. Which is a really interesting study. So I would like Ashish to introduce a little bit what the study is about and what are the main findings of the study.
Yeah, Michael, the whole issue with pulse oximeters overestimating oxygen saturation in individuals with darker skin pigmentation has been in the news for the last about 3 or 4 years. We all know the publication in the New England Journal in 2020 that highlighted this issue. So we thought that we were going to investigate the performance of the True Signal SpO2 sensors that are manufactured by GE Healthcare in using pooled data from adults with different types of skin pigmentation. So essentially, this was a retrospective study. And like I said, it used pooled assessments of paired SpO2 and SaO2 measurements. And it looked at bias, it looked at accuracy, and it looked at precision. And we, for the purposes of the study, divided the oxygenation into three bands. That was between 70 to 80%, 80 to 90%, and more than 90%. And which makes sense also clinically, as we know, as we sort of have a normal oxygen saturation, more than 90%, less than 90%. We make a lot of decisions around those points. So that was the background rationale. In terms of the overall results, we examined about 11,000 data points across these 9 studies. And overall, these were about 131 adults in all. And we did use, instead of self-reported ethnicity, we looked at pigmentation using something called the Fitzpatrick scale that classified skin pigmentation from grade 1 to grade 5 in sort of an increasing order of skin pigmentation. We found that about 75% of our total population was in the light pigment group, and then another 25% was in the dark pigment group. The overall results, in short, demonstrated that the bias itself was fairly minimum, was about 0.14% overall, and then was about 1% across the various skin pigmentation bands. Importantly, it was the lower oxygen saturation band where there was a significant difference in the bias between the light and dark pigment groups. That was statistically significant. So remember, the lower oxygen saturation band was oxygen saturation of 70 to 80%. And then the overall accuracy was 1.64 for the light and 1.71 for the dark skin pigmentation group. The FDA and regulatory agencies usually allow us about less than 3 or less than 4% for our accuracy, and this was so very fair, variously within the device specifications given by regulatory agencies. So the overall what I could conclude with this was at least with this particular group of oxygen saturation sensors, the precision, accuracy, and bias was all within reasonable limits. So overall low bias, high accuracy, and high precision. Now, having said all of that, there was some concern that as the oxygen saturation least reached lower levels, there was a difference in bias and statistically significant difference. So we do feel that there needs to be more work, and there needs to be specifically prospective studies designed to examine this issue in greater detail.
But overall, I mean, can we conclude that these data are quite reassuring after some years of discussion about this specific point, especially, I guess, during the COVID, this was a main issue for all of us involved in critical care of COVID patients.
Yeah, so interesting observation. Yes, I will say that seeing this data, I'm reassured that even if there is a difference, that difference is at lower oxygen saturation or lower SpO2 values. We all know that in general, when patients have really low SpO2, that's below 80%, then the reliability of pulse oximeters in general goes down, and there's other factors as well that might play into this. So in my world, yes, I take this data as very reassuring. Most decisions I make, and maybe you make and others make, are at an SpO2 of 90, 92, 93%. And at those values, we did not see any occult hypoxemia, at least not in these 130 odd patients that we examined.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the range where you make clinical decision. So it's yeah, I followed a little bit the pathway of informations that during the COVID came out about the skin pigmentation related bias on SpO2, and this I found this study really interesting because it makes some some clear points on some issues that were discussed during the pandemic. So, but I was thinking, how was the journey between the idea to the publication? So, if you can just describe in brief what was the journey of this paper.
So the journey really, like I said earlier, mm, you know, for a lot of us, we've been interested and curious. That publication in the New England Journal by the group from the University of Michigan in 2020 really set the stage. And as we know, it was an impactful publication because they saw in two large cohorts that Black patients had nearly 3 times the frequency of occult hypoxemia that was not detected by pulse oximetry as compared to white patients. And knowing that there was other issues raised around racial disparities with management of COVID-19, this became really, really significant. So I, being an intensivist, I've managed a lot of patients with COVID-19. I was very, very curious about this. I know there's been a lot of work in this area. A lot of device companies have since gone to the FDA as well, and the FDA has reached out to a lot of device companies. In fact, the FDA issued a safety communication in 2020, 2021, and then a report in 2022 where they really asked for the device companies to, have a more robust system of detection of inaccuracies around SpO2 oxygenation compared to SeO2. So I've been very interested in this area. Um, this journey really scientifically began from all of that, and then more specifically for this particular set of investigations, we worked with the group from GE Healthcare and their engineers and their scientific advisors to sort of build this data set and to examine this data set closely. And that's how we evolved, taking that question, knowing that these nine studies had been published in 131 individuals. We wanted to go back and look at pool data from these studies to really see if we could look at SpO2 and SaO2 measurements and add some clarity. And most importantly, really inform our colleagues around what we thought was clinically relevant levels of oxygenation that where we make decisions, and knowing that all of us use pulse oximeters, specifically use pulse oximeters, not just for our patients in the hospital. Some people use pulse oximeters at home. I think the implications were very significant for doing something like this.
I find really fascinating the word you used, curiosity. I was curious. So even behind big studies, big projects, there is always some curiosity that triggers the scientists, you know. So I find really interesting and really fascinating it.
Yeah, no, I mean curiosity, right? So I mean when this data first came out, I was a little disturbed because I did not want the scientific community to feel that we were adding a layer of additional bias in the way we manage our patients. I don't think that is the case. That's never been the case. And obviously, we do understand that a pulse oximeter, like any other device, has to be used in the right manner on the right patient and at the right time. uh, but having said that, along with curiosity, you also feel that with something as common as a pulse oximeter that we use in the everywhere in the hospital and now everywhere at home, this is sort of our duty to the general population to inform them that people should not feel disturbed that their data is being wrongly interpreted because of their skin color, right? People should still feel that they are safe. Obviously, if we had uncovered something that would have been a large discrepancy, then that would have meant that we should have reported that immediately, and things should be done as next steps.
Yeah, very clear. Thanks. Just I was wondering, did you encounter any challenges during the process of any kind? Because here in this podcast, we are also trying to show, and I always ask the same question because I find interesting when scientists explain that it's the process, it's not always straightforward, so you can encounter some problems on your pathway from the generation of the idea to the publication. So maybe you have some challenges that you encounter that can be of help for other researchers working on the same topics.
I think the biggest challenge was the data was fairly heterogeneous, right? These were nine studies conducted in different environments with different um, methodologies. Even though all studies used healthy volunteers, we did know that the data itself, it was challenging to piece the data together for the data to be homogeneous. Obviously, we understand that with pooled data, you lose some granularity. So definitely there is some deficiencies in our data, specifically around issues like, um, for example, the BMI of these patients, right? It's one issue. Not all of these nine studies reported BMI accurately, so we didn't have that data appropriately. There was also some other missing data points, but you compromise on the other side by having lots and lots of data. Healthy volunteers, we know, are not like critically ill patients, right? And even though you perform these experiments to induce hypoxia, this is not the same as a patient, say, with COVID-19 who has not been properly treated, or a patient with septic shock on high-dose vasopressors with ARDS, where there's poor peripheral perfusion, or other uh, pathophysiological issues that are going to impair peripheral oxygenation, right? So even though we've tried to mimic low oxygen tensions, it's not the same as a critically ill patient in the ICU. So, these were inherent challenges when we analyzed the data. Um, Obviously, that's why these studies cannot be taken as replacements for prospectively done experiments, and can also not be taken as replacements for critically ill real world patients who would have that possible discrepancy between SpO2 and SaO2. So, um, yeah, so in short, challenges, yes, but I think we use some appropriate statistical methodology, at least with this data, to overcome some of the statistical challenges. The other issues will obviously remain, that retrospective data is retrospective data, cannot be compared to prospective studies.
Thank you. The last question is, you already said it. That we need prospective studies, of course. Do you already have in mind a study design that could be appropriate for this kind of to answer this kind of question?
Yeah, so it's a fascinating question. I think myself and others all over the world are thinking about better prospective study designs, maybe something that is highly pragmatic, maybe something that includes a patients across a spectrum of perfusion pressures, because we know perfusion pressures would affect this. Maybe patients across a spectrum of BMIs, um, maybe patients across a spectrum of critical illness as well, because I do feel that underlying critical illness would affect some of these results. How we do that, obviously, I think we need to form a larger global consortium of interested investigators who want to come together, because I also feel like this needs to be a global study rather than just something done in the United States or in Asia or in Europe, because the implications are truly across the world. And then finally, I do feel that research is one aspect of this, but I feel that the regulatory agencies really need to pay attention to this, because despite all of this, this is also an opportunity to improve the process measures around regulation and approval of devices. And finally, as we do all of that, when we put these devices in clinical practice, this is also an important opportunity to educate our medical students, our trainees, and even our colleagues around what the problem is, and what is the implications, and really how we should use the right oxygen sensor with the right patient and at the right time. And the reason I say that is that, yes, this data is very reassuring, but but people should be educated around exactly what the problem is, so that they don't feel that they are over anxious about this. They also don't I should also feel that everyone should know exactly what the problem is. And then finally, I've also seen oxygen saturation sensors being used the wrong way, right? So we've seen, something that needs to be used on the finger being used on the nose, or something that's a clip for the nose being used on the finger, or the other way around. People put it on the underside of the lip or the ear. We know that those kinds of mistakes, then obviously you are not measuring the right thing at all, right? So despite this research, I still believe there should be a lot of education and awareness in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with this point. I'm into TIVA, TCI, and neuromonitoring, processed EEG monitoring, and it's absolutely the same. It's not only the right device and the right monitor, it's the way people apply it and interpret it. So it's this. I absolutely agree with this last sentence. So I think we are done. Our time is running out, but I would like to really thank Professor Khanna to be with us and to share some time with us. So really thank you once again. First of all, because you choose the JCMC for this really nice submission, and second to be here today in this podcast and video interview series. So thank you once again.
Thank you, Mikhail, and thank you to the editorial board of the JCMC. It's been a wonderful journey, and we hope that this publication will create the necessary education and awareness around this issue, and will help guide appropriate, treatment and appropriate clinical decisions for our patients. Thank you again for everything.
Thank you. I also remember our listeners to subscribe our channels on YouTube, Spotify, and of course to share our contents on social media to increase awareness on what we are doing at the JCMC. Thank you, Ashish. Thank you.